everyone. Welcome back. Another episode of Mysteries After Dark. I am your host, Jerry. And yes, I'm still using that backdrop. I kind of like it now. It's growing on me. So, once again, Seth, thank you. Bear Apparel. I think it's just a cool name. I don't know. Maybe I'm just weird. So, tonight's episode, it's going to be kind of interesting. I don't know. We'll see what you think. And of course, if you have any thoughts and you're watching me live on Facebook, Mysteries After Dark, feel free to leave a comment and I will get to them on air if I have a chance. But I am going to try to keep it short. I know our attention spans, they're not what they used to be. So, I think it's a valid question. What are these shadowy figures that people see in the dark of night, sometimes standing at the foot of their own bed? How horrifying would that be? Imagine that. You're sleeping in your bed when suddenly you are drawn from your slumber because you feel the presence of someone that doesn't belong in your room, that nagging feeling that we all get when we are being stared at. Slowly you open your eyes and you see this menacing dark figure, a perfect silhouette of a human standing at the foot of your bed, obviously staring at you through the darkness. I don't know about you, but that makes my skin crawl. I don't really want that. Hello, Mr. Shadowman. Please don't eat my face. So on tonight's episode, we are going to talk about what these dark figures could possibly be, the different descriptions we have been given from witnesses. Is there more than one type of these creatures? And, of course, we will look at what science offers us as an explanation. I'm just saying, science usually, they don't like to get outside of their little box. So I'm sure it'll be mundane, to say the least. These reports, they fascinate me. You know, be it a real entity or something constructed by our minds. And I have a personal experience, I guess we'll say, that I'll share with you. I'll share it with you later. So let's just go ahead and start off with what academia, what science, what they have to say about these shadowy figures. Well, there are several physiological and psychological conditions which can account for reported experiences of shadowy shapes seemingly alive. A sleep paralysis sufferer may perceive a shadow or an indistinct shape approaching them when they lie awake paralyzed and become increasingly alarmed, as anyone would, by the way. Shadow moving towards you, that's definitely a reason to jump out a window. Also, a person experiencing heightened emotions, such as while walking alone on a dark night, may incorrectly perceive a patch of shadow as an attacker. Sleep deprivation, that can definitely cause hallucinations. And, I don't know, sleep paralysis and sleep deprivation. And I have, let me go ahead and share this as well. I actually have a rather interesting sleep deprivation story. I was a child, maybe 12 or 13 years old. Me and my cousin, we used to see who could stay up the longest. Usually we would watch Elvira up all night, or Godzilla movies, Monster Vision, whatever show they would run. I think, what that used to be on, maybe it was Channel 36. I don't remember anymore. God, it's been so long. Well, there was a summer break, and I decided I would beat his record because he did stay up for quite a while one time, and I said, hey, I can do that. You know, if you can do an all-nighter, I can as well. And it was a Saturday. Actually, they were running a goofy show, Attack of the Killer Tomato rerun, if I remember correctly. And usually we would stay up that night until the early hours of the morning. But this time I decided I wasn't going to go to sleep. I wasn't going to pass out Saturday at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. That I would see how long I can hold out. And I finally gave in sometime in the early evening of the following Wednesday. So I pulled a few days straight there. What I do remember, I mean, parts of it I do, parts of it I don't. I remember my grandmother telling me, "Oh, you're going to die if you don't go to sleep," and other goofy things. I don't know. But something rather interesting did start happening probably around Tuesday early morning. Again, I don't recall all of the details, but I was made aware. I began talking and interacting with people that were not there. Auditory hallucinations. I remember I could hear voices. And then finally, I gave in and went to sleep eventually. I did get to the point where I could start to see silhouettes, I guess you would say. I don't know. But anyway, aside from sleep deprivation causing hallucinations, or possibly being the reason for these shadowy figures, finally we have full-on visual hallucinations, which are, they're caused by schizophrenia, bipolar. It is a disorder. There is an issue there. And those who suffer with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, most times they appear to see shadowy figures on the edge of their peripheral. It isn't quite like that movie, A Beautiful Mind, where he's interacting with a few different imagined people, I guess you'd say. Usually it's just movement off the corner of the eye. Before anyone gets terribly concerned about that last explanation offered to us, though, if you have seen something like this, this might bring you comfort in knowing most of the people that witness these things, they stare directly at them. It isn't something out the corner of their eye. So if you are seeing something like this, I'm just saying, don't jump straight to the worst case scenario. So, usually these people aren't catching glimpses, so to speak. So, I know I've said on past episodes, at least one or two, that I had some experiences which drew me to begin exploring paranormal phenomenon. And I'm going to share one of those with you, aside from the sleep deprivation. That one doesn't really count. I was about 17 years old, sleeping on the couch over at my uncle's house with my, at the time, girlfriend lying directly behind me. This house has had a lot of very strange occurrences, one of which we had something really interesting occur where it involved law enforcement, and they came out. It was back in the mid-'70s, and I wasn't alive yet, obviously. But essentially, they had no clue what was going on, and it startled them, to say the least. And maybe I'll cover that on a later episode. But anyway, I digress. So I was laying there, sound asleep. All the lights are off. And the couch, it faced the windows. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I had a feeling of being looked at. I don't know if you've ever been asleep. Even if you're not asleep, looking the other way, you can just feel when a friend, family member, anybody's staring at you. You get that feeling. I don't know. It's hard to explain. So anyway, I get this feeling. It actually wakes me up. I kind of came to, but I wasn't really conscious yet. And I kind of had that feeling. I'm like, what is going on? Then I opened my eyes to look around, like, somebody awake staring at me. And I can see the darkness of the room and a little bit of light coming in from the outside windows from the yard light. And as I'm laying there with this feeling, I see two pairs of eyes that were darker than the room. Okay, there's no light in the room. They blinked open. Suddenly there's these eyes. Whatever the eyes were attached to, it was short. Couldn't have been more than maybe 3 foot, maybe a hair over 3 foot. And I tried to get up because, there's something in the house. I'm going to get up. I'm going to punch it. But the problem is I couldn't move. I couldn't talk. And as I'm laying there kind of freaking out, like I can't do anything, another set of eyes open up. And then another, until we have about 6 pairs of eyes now looking directly at me. And it's hard to explain, I guess. Picture a pair of almonds, with the pointy ends of the almonds facing each other, maybe 2 inches tall, 3 inches wide, spaced, I don't know, a couple inches apart. And they're so dark, and that was the part that really, it still sticks with me. They were so dark that I could see them in the shadow. And I know this is hard to understand, I guess, but I'm trying my best to explain it here. So I'm laying there, and I'm trying to yell, and at this point, I'm trying to yell help. And I can feel air, like pushing the air out of my lungs, but there's no words. Like my vocal cords just weren't working. And as I'm doing this, these eyes, they're getting closer to me, and one of them moves between the window and me. So now, I know it sounds odd, I guess we'll say, but I can see a good outline of this thing's head. And it appeared to be very bulbous at the top and kind of tapered down, kind of like a light bulb does, I guess you'd say. So, as I said, I was trying to yell, and I continued to do this. And finally, I was able to make like a little squeal, screech sound, which was just enough that it caused my, again, at the time, girlfriend, this was years and years ago, to move. And in the instant that she bumped into me, I was suddenly able to yell and move. So I immediately jumped up off the couch, and I'm throwing punches, which of course hits absolutely nothing. And then I turned the light on. So, I mean, picture this. I'm literally punching with my right hand and throwing kicks while my left hand is trying to find the ceiling fan cord and pull it to turn it on. I probably burned about 500 calories in 2 seconds. But here's the question. What did I see? What was that? Well, in all honesty, it was probably a horrible case of sleep paralysis. I was probably having a nightmare of some type, which caused me to open my eyes and begin processing the world around me. But since I wasn't fully awake, it caused parts of that nightmare to be interjected and incorporated into my perceived reality, causing me to see something that just wasn't there. Basically, I was having a nightmare with my eyes open within the setting of what I saw around me. Kids today, maybe augmented reality. I guess that would be an easy way to explain it. And I'm happy with that explanation. The alternative is horrifying, so I'm completely happy with the sleep paralysis explanation. So the difference between what I had happen and the issue with these Shadowmen, Hatmen, I will get into that, those reports, is that we have people witnessing these shadows, these entities, while they are wide awake. They are not having a case of sleep paralysis, many times looking, as I said, directly at the creature, and these people have no signs of mental or cognitive issues. I think perhaps it's worth noting that these types of entities, they have been reported for thousands of years. There's, a huge number of religions, legends, belief systems that describe shadowy, we'll say spiritual beings or supernatural entities such as shades of the underworld and various shadowy creatures. They've long been a staple of folklore and mythology and ghost stories. Islam gives us the jinn, the Choctaws. They had the Nalusa Chito. We, believe it or not, even have cave paintings of these things. And I know that that might sound a little odd, but we sure do. So these shadow entities, I guess we'll call them shadow men, shadow people. There's also been shadow women reported, but anyway, they're usually they're reported as being tall or larger than a standard human shadow, I guess we'd say. But there's also reports of them being average person size. They're usually reported as having a male presence or being masculine in appearance. But like I mentioned, there's also reports of them being feminine. So essentially these things, they do appear to come in all shapes and sizes, although predominantly 90%, 95% of the time they are described as a male persona, I guess we'd say. Sometimes these entities are reported as moving faster than a human or with a type of jerking motion, like the stop motion that many of us have seen in horror movies. And I promise you, if I saw that, that would be the exact moment when I would jump out the nearest window. I'm gone. I'm not even waiting. I'm out. I like watching movies that has some of that in it. There's been a few of them because I don't get creeped out with horror movies, but that motion, for some reason, I don't know what it is, but I just don't like seeing it. So anyway, the common trait among all these creatures is that those who witness them often report having a feeling of dread or doom or despair, as if these entities give off some type of negative energy, or perhaps they somehow affect the chemical makeup of the brain at least for a short period of time. As a side note, the term shadow people, it's thrown around a lot, but a lot of people don't know where it comes from. And if you're going to use it, you should at least do a little bit of research. It was given to us by paranormal researcher and book author Heidi Hollis. She claims that shadow people have been around since the beginning of time and usually appear as dark, human-shaped silhouettes in our peripheral vision. Interesting. So I have a creepy one for you on this same topic here, the Inuit people. They talk about a creature called Taraxi. Many times these entities are described as being shadows, but they have some other attributes that are very interesting. So let me paint a picture. You're out camping, zipped up safely in your tent, when suddenly you hear the faint sound of a conversation. Perhaps even some giggling and the unmistakable sounds of footsteps crunching leaves. You know that there is no one around you, and there should not be anyone in that area. So you quickly unzip the tent door to look outside, and for a brief moment you glimpse one or perhaps a few shadowy figures walking around. But in an instant, they're gone. As where the typical shadow person makes no sounds, these creatures can be heard. But of course, it don't end there. We have Inuit stories about these creatures being able to look like family members to lure children away into the woods. Inuit parents actually warn their children they must stay away from these creatures, that if you ever hear one outside that you never go after them. So they believe that these entities, they exist in another realm that is right next to our reality, but we cannot directly see or interact with them. However, and God, this is just horrible. We can't do nothing with them, but they can take us to their world. And from everything I've heard about these stories while I was doing research for this episode, that usually leads to a horrible fate. So if you are, in a place where you think you're alone and you hear something, just leave the tent zipped, close. Don't go outside the cabin. Don't go outside the tent. Stay in your trailer, whatever the case might be. And if you see them running towards the woods, don't go. We've all seen horror movies. We all know that does not end good. You don't follow them. So another shadowy figure that is common in today's, I guess we'll say, folklore. It's the Hat Man. We've all heard about it. Although mostly reported at night, this entity has also been spotted, at least reportedly by those that witnessed it, in the daylight hours. Typically a person will awaken to see what appears to be a living silhouette or a shadow of a man wearing a brimmed hat, sometimes reporting that this shadow, this hat man, has glowing red eyes. And why not? Because, a shadow isn't frightening enough when it's moving around and alive without red eyes, right? Let's make it worse. The commonalities that everyone agrees on about this entity is that it appears to be a male. The Hat Man's almost always, I believe, actually always, as far as I've been able to ascertain, been reported as masculine. It gives off that type of a presence, I guess you would say. It's wearing a fedora type hat and what appears to be a trench coat. What's interesting is that they all report this creature to be right at about 6 feet tall. And that's pretty much every Hat Man report I could pull. That's what they're all saying. And I find that to be an interesting consistency. Pretty much every report that I was able to find, also, they report that it gives them an ominous or dreadful feeling. And Diane chimes in, Undertaker. I was thinking about that, this Hat Man with the fedora and the trench coat. In many ways, that does remind you of like an Undertaker or a gravedigger, perhaps. So I don't know. Is it a situation where we have entities, perhaps and I know this sounds crazy and it's fine, but there's reports that entities can feed on our emotions somehow. I don't quite grasp that from a physics background, but that's okay. And perhaps by triggering our fear, it causes something to be released that they can harvest or that they can partake of or consume. And most people are afraid of death, and emulating a human that is normally involved with that process, being an undertaker, gravedigger, whatever the case might be, perhaps it has found that it's beneficial, and that would perhaps lend credence to this creature being around at least, since the 30s, or perhaps in the 30s it changed up its guise. Perhaps before then it was something that was equally horrifying to a prior generation. So I don't know on that one. I do know that in England, they have reports of a shadowy, hooded monk, usually seen at churches or ruins of old churches. I don't get how that one works, but maybe in that case, we're just talking about a regular spirit, perhaps, someone that's passed on. We have these reports of dark smoke-like apparitions over there, and they've been photographed and reported over the years. So we get these reports from these types of entities quite literally from across the world. So whatever they are, creature, spirit, hallucination, they're everywhere. So when maybe a little lighter side here for a quick second. As I was doing research for this episode, I came across several interesting reports, I guess you'd say. It would seem that whatever these things are, they're not limited to just humans. I know, shocker. We have reported shadow dogs, cats, birds, and yes, a shadow rat. Okay. If I recall correctly, he trained 4 turtles to become ninja master. No, I'm sorry. So, this might come as a surprise to some of you. I'm very much an outdoorsman, shocker, I know. And I have personally heard stories from people that have been out in the woods, and they say that they saw, we're just going to say, a large creature Sometimes it sounds like a Bigfoot report, okay? When they first start talking about it, it very much begins like a Bigfoot report. I saw this large hulking creature, and that's where everything changes. That's where all the similarities end. They're reported as shadows, pitch black creatures. And what's interesting is that in some of the stories I've heard, and which prompted me to start digging in and actually finding other people that have talked about it, they're describing something being darker than a moonless night. I mean, whatever this creature is, you can see it. You can see the shadow of this. I guess the closest thing that people talk about most commonly would be Bigfoot, and it's darker than the night. And they can see it moving around the trees from several yards away. So ultimately it's going to come down really only two scenarios. These things are either there or they are not. These things are actually creatures, or they're going to be figments of the imagination, be it from sleep deprivation, paralysis, perhaps even a simple case of an overactive imagination. If they're not real, then that's simple. The story ends right there. But if these things are real, then we need to look at some interesting possibilities. The way I look at it is if they are real, there's a few explanations for what these entities could be. They're going to, something from a parallel reality, perhaps either accidentally or willingly crossing over into our world. They could be a hyperdimensional being, but I think that if that were the case, they would be very close to our three-dimensional world. This explanation would also encompass ghosts and spirits, angels and demons, by the way. Perhaps, and this one appeases the geek in me, perhaps it is the shadow of a higher dimensional being that is being cast into our reality. And if that seems difficult to understand, perhaps this can offer an easier explanation. Two-dimensional being could not perceive a human in their reality, but rather the shadow that you would cast on that piece of paper, I guess we'll say. Just like when you go online, you look up Tesseract Cube, okay? That isn't us trying to replicate that fourth dimensional cube. That is us just trying to comprehend the shadow that this fourth dimensional cube would project into our reality. So when you're looking at this thing, having a hard time grasping how complex this higher dimensional cube, this fourth dimensional cube, how complex it is, but oh, I'm so close to understanding it. I can see the way the lines are coming together. You're not even close. That's just the shadow that would come off of it from a light source. Let that sink in for a minute. So perhaps a fourth or fifth dimensional being, perhaps they quite literally cast shadows into this reality. Of course, there is the possibility that these things are naturally occurring phenomenon right here within this reality, some type of life form that we have yet to understand. That if they're real, I think that would probably be a very likely scenario. And of course, because I can never leave any episode without, I'm going to talk about extraterrestrials. So perhaps they are, like I said, extraterrestrial, and they utilize some type of a cloaking technology that perhaps occasionally fails, or that some people are able to still somehow see these creatures when this cloaking is occurring, but they appear colorless or black. And, I'm also going to mention that this idea is supported with the document released from the Defense Intelligence Agency, which does state that there are non-terrestrial craft and occupants within our airspace, and that they do, in fact, utilize a type of cloaking technology. I try to say that like an infomercial. Did I do good? I mean, those really are the only options. If these things are in fact real, that's it. So that's all I have on that. Maybe, I don't know, maybe a parting thought. How about that? So tonight, when you're safely tucked beneath the covers, lying in your bed, perhaps you shouldn't turn out all of the lights. Maybe tonight, leave the hallway light on with the door cracked just enough to let just a sliver of light enter your room. Just enough light to tell if that shadow is really against the wall or if it's standing at the foot of your bed, patiently, silently waiting for your eyes to close, waiting to close the door. Good night. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode. I've been your host, Jerry. I hope you found it fun. Until next time, be safe.